back, everybody. It is really great to see you all, and it's really great for us in the Co-op and Career Services team to see this many students in the room starting back this semester after having been out on Co-op. This is our record number of students who are enrolled in Co-op Assessment 1 and 2, and we're thrilled to have you here. And it only means great things for both you, for our program, and we're really excited to have you back here on campus, so welcome back. We've heard great things about what you've been doing, and you've done us proud. You've made the university proud, you've made us and the Co-op and the Career Services team very, very proud. So for those of you who might not know me, my name is Ray Perry. I'm the Director of Cooperative Education here at the university. And we've had a very exciting summer and a lot of transition and some changes. Our program is growing, so we've brought on some additional resources. So one of the things that I want to do before we get started with the evening is to just introduce some of the Co-op and Career Services team so that you can at least get an eye for some of the faces and some of the people that you're going to be working with this year. So one of the new things, how many of you have been over to University Crossing? Good. Come visit us. We're on the 4th floor. It's a beautiful building if you haven't been there yet. We've got wonderful offices. So we want to make sure you guys come on by and visit with us as frequently as you did when we were over in South. Some of the other stuff that's changed is we have some different staff. We have some new folks, and we have some people taking on some different roles. So we have Carrie Willard-Bray. Carrie, wave. She's in the back, black and pink. Carrie worked with us part-time and worked with mechanical engineering students as well as students in the Manning School of Business. And Carrie now is full-time as the Assistant Director of the Manning School of Business. Assistant Director of, not of the School of Business, sorry. I just gave you a promotion. The Assistant Director of Co-op for the Manning School of Business. We also have Jessica Paquin. She's back working with electrical and computer engineering all the way in the back of the room. And this is the first group of students in electrical and computer engineering who have been through Co-op. It's the first cohort that's now back from Co-op and in the Co-op Assessment 1 class. So welcome back. We have Amanda Holmes. She's a new staff member. She is now the Co-op coordinator for mechanical engineering. She's going to be working with the new students in the mechanical engineering program. And for those of you MEs that hadn't heard, you're still stuck with me. So you'll be working with me for your co-op search, and Amanda's taking on the new folks. And then we have Jim McGonigal. Many of you worked with Jim last year. He worked with both plastics, mechanical, chemical, pretty much anybody that we sent his way. He's now the co-op coordinator for plastics engineering. So Jim will work with that entire group. And we have Lada Lau. Lada is our newest staff member. I think she's been here, what, a week and a half, perhaps? Lada is going to be working with chemical engineering students, coaching them for their job search. We have chemical engineering back on board with a full co-op program. And we also, Sandia Val-Supermedia's here, working with computer science for just a little bit longer. Sandia is going to be transitioning to work full-time on her PhD. So, but we're not letting her go, she's still around. And we also, in the spirit of hanging on to people in our co-op and career services team, you'll recognize the name Diane Hewitt. Diane's in the back. Diane has recently retired as the director of co-op, but we're hanging on to her, and she is working with us on a variety of projects, but primarily working with our employer partners part-time. So you'll see Diane on campus. And then also, for those of you who have been around for a little while, you'll recognize the name Erin Doyen. Erin has moved into the other side of the fence, I guess. She has taken on a position last year working with college relations with Phillips Healthcare in Andover, and Erin actually is going to be teaching at night the PDS class, so we won't let her go either. I think, is Martina here? Okay, Martina Witz was the former assistant director for the Manning School of Business. I know she's going to be joining us a little bit later. She wants to see the students that she's been working with. She's still at the university, but she's now moved into the director of career services role. So Martina's changed. And then the person that you heard a little bit in the background, Greg Dennett is our assistant dean for career services and cooperative education. He provides leadership for the whole troop, whether it's the career side of the house or the co-op side of the house. And we also have Karen O'Donnell, who is, to identify what your job is, Karen. She does everything. She is the event coordinator. She does employer outreach. She does the career fairs that we have, the large career fairs, and really Career Link, you name it. So Karen keeps us all running on time and organized. So that's the team. Please take advantage of these resources that are available to you. We want to see you, and we want to see you soon and frequently. So come by, all right? We have a very full agenda for tonight. You'll see the agenda in your packets. So please take a look. The first part of the evening, we are very fortunate to have a keynote from one of our highly regarded faculty on campus. And then we're going to break. We're going to have some dinner. And then while we're having dinner, we're going to be joined by additional faculty and staff from the different disciplines who we've invited to join us. And then we'll introduce those folks at that point for part of our debrief conversation. Okay, so that's the plan. And then we'll also talk about some of the details for the course at the end of the night. So, to get us started, we are very fortunate to have Kimberly Merriman, who is an associate professor of management in the Manning School of Business. She's joining us this evening, and her research focuses on the effectiveness and social impact of extrinsic motivators such as pay to explain outcomes ranging from employee performance to the gender earnings gap. She's published in a wide range of academic and business outlets, including the Journal of Management and the Harvard Business Review. Kimberly holds a PhD in Organizational Management and Human Resources from Temple University, and prior to entering academia, she spent over 12 years as a business and property valuation consultant, providing services to large corporations, small businesses, and government entities. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Merriman.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you all first for inviting me. And hello, hardworking UMass Lowell students. Raise your hand if you cannot hear me at all. That's a trick question. That's a joke. So if you got it, that means you're listening. Thank you. I am so pleased to be here. And as Ray said, this is my research specialty, extrinsic motivation. And when I was asked and given the opportunity to speak on it, the real dilemma was, from my point of view, there are so many interesting and important things to do with extrinsic motivation. How do I narrow it down to just a few, the few most impactful ones for your purpose, for your career success? And this is what I narrowed down. These labels won't mean much to you right now, but later when you go back and reflect on this talk and look at the materials that are provided in your folder related to this talk, I think this will help you put it in perspective. So these are the 4 things that we'll be covering: the grit, equity, perception, sustainable pace, and flow. First, I need to lay some foundational information, right? Just like you're back in class. You probably realize this, but let's go over what leads to work performance, successful work performance. It requires ability. It requires material resources, the tools for the job. And then, as you figured out already tonight, we're talking about the third piece, and that is motivation. When we look at motivation, this is one thing I can say for certain from the research. Holding all else equal, and by all else I mean ability and material resources, someone who is higher in motivation will perform better than someone who is low in motivation. But we could phrase this a different way. Have you ever wondered why some people perform so much better than another person who might be equal or even superior in ability, equal or even superior in the material resources that they have? Why is that? Motivation can explain that, and it does in many of the studies done pertaining to motivation. But to really understand how to use it to your benefit, you first need to know the specific definition of motivation. So here it is. It's where do you choose to direct your effort, this psychological force that is in you, directing you to choose, say, coming to here instead of many of the other things you could have chosen tonight. That's one part of it, but showing up, let's call that the showing up piece, that's just one part of motivation. Also, it's the force that tells you how much effort to put forth, the intensity of the effort. Some of you will be very intensely engaged, others less so. So it's the intensity. But the most important piece, probably, for long-term career success is this third piece. It's the persistence of effort. Am I getting too much feedback? Maybe I'll hold that a little further away. It's that persistence of effort, and that means when you encounter obstacles, how likely are you to keep up that intensity of effort, to keep directing your effort in that direction towards that goal? So for instance here, let's say you got very hot, not hard to imagine, right? Or very hungry, or all of a sudden you just didn't understand what was going on. These are all different obstacles that could occur tonight. Will you stay engaged at this intense level or not? This persistence of effort is something that the research tells us can make a big difference between, say, an average or good performer and a superior achiever. So look at this. I think you'll find it interesting. There's a study that was done, and this researcher, Duckworth, and colleagues, first thing they set out to do was measure this persistence of effort. They figured, well, people differ in their tendency. They looked at it as almost a personality trait. And they thought, well, first, can we develop a measure for it? And they did, a 12-item measure. And can we go across many different samples? And they did, to have people fill out this measure, and let's see if people differ in this quality. And they did. But more importantly, let's see, as we would predict, as we would hypothesize, let's see if it does matter for performance. So they went into all these high achievement contexts. And what they found is, yes, even among all these high achievers, this would predict, someone who is higher in this tendency, what they called grit, what we're saying is this tendency to persist, someone that's higher in this tendency is going to shine among that group. So look at this. They looked at educational attainment, the completion of a post-secondary degree versus not. This measure predicted it. Your grittiness predicted that. Higher grade point average among UPenn students, University of Pennsylvania, predicted by this measure. National Spelling Bee ranking. And retention of West Point graduates. I'll talk about that a little more in just the next slide, because I think you can relate most closely to it, because they were, during the time of the study, beginning their post-secondary education just like you were not too long ago. Well, not only did it predict, but it predicted over and above IQ, whether someone would be the highest achiever or not. Predicted 4% of the variation in the performance. And you might think, oh, that doesn't seem like a lot. But in predicting human performance, that's a lot. That's the difference between being here or being the top or the cream of the crop. So in West Point, the study that they did with the military academy, well, first, let's back up a moment. I said you're similar to these students, but in a key way, you're different. When they start their program, they have to, before they begin their fall term, do 7 weeks of basic training over the summer. This basic training is referred to as the Beast Barracks by some, so that gives you an idea of how grueling it is. And completion, the ones who start and end up making it all the way through and then starting classes in the fall, it's not everyone. About 1 in 20 don't make it. About 1 in 20 drop out on average, about 5%. So in their sample, it was actually a little higher, about 5.8% did not make it. No surprise, that's what they expected, but can we predict who will make it and who won't? So they took their measure, and look, there's their measure. If we can break down the definition a little more, this idea of grit, how they measured it, 6 items looked at your consistency of interest. And they reverse scored this, which is what that means is if you scored high on that, you are likely to stay with one goal and keep focused on it versus looking for novelty, chasing different interests every few months. The second part of it, and this combined to one overall measure, the second part looked at perseverance of effort. So if you came up on an obstacle, would you persevere? So they had previously validated this measure, and they had all the cadets do it right at the start, before the basic training began, but right as they arrived. So look at West Point's measure. One key way in which they choose applicants is what they call the whole candidate score. What do we have here? The high school rank, the SAT score, the leadership potential score, which is based on your extracurricular activities for the most part, and a physical aptitude exam. Now, these two measures were not correlated, meaning they weren't measuring the same thing, they were measuring two distinct things. So you tell me, which do you think would predict the retention, meaning the candidates that would make it versus the ones that would not through the basic training? Which would be the better predictor? The whole candidate score? Raise your hand. Yes, I see. You would think so. I would think so. Okay, the grit score. Raise your hand. And you know that because this is the topic of my talk, and you would hope this matters, right? And it did. Matter of fact, this predicted, the grit scale, if you were one standard deviation above average on your grittiness, you had a 62% greater likelihood of making it through basic training. The whole candidate score was not a significant predictor at all. All right, so you know what question should be on your mind right now? What question? What are you thinking right now? Are you thinking what I'm thinking? How do you get gritty? Right? Are you gritty? Can you get grittier? That's what I'd be thinking, and I know you are too. Pardon? Sandpaper? That's not the way, but I will tell you a way. In the materials that I provided, there's the measure, the 12 items, and how to interpret them after you answer them, how to interpret them into a rating. So you can assess how gritty you are based on that. Now, I said this got investigated as a dispositional tendency, similar to a personality trait, which implies it's somewhat fixed. So you either have it or not, right? And if you don't have it, you're out of luck, right? Oh, that would be too sad, right? That's not the case. That would not be the case. It is developable. And so thought, well, what can I tell you concisely as far as how to develop grit? And this is what I want to say. Okay, first the obvious part, and then something a little less obvious. First, you got to exercise it like you do a muscle. So exercising this tendency to remain focused on a specific goal. Exercising the tendency to persevere when faced with an obstacle. So now, second, the not so obvious part, this might sound like I'm saying, even if you fail, keep doing the same thing you did that didn't work last time, and that's grittiness. That's not what I'm saying. Even if you fail, well, you should still persist towards that goal, but you make incremental adjustments to how you're proceeding towards that goal versus abandoning the goal altogether. The more you practice that, the better you become at it, regardless of your natural inclination towards it. Soak that in a second. Tuck it away there and make a commitment right now that you're going to go practice that in just your day-to-day life with all of your goals. Because now I want to take the emphasis, the burden off of you. Because normally when we talk about motivation, we talk about it as being done to us. I'm in the workplace. Is my organization motivating me enough? So let's shift our spotlight to the organization's role in our motivation and your ultimate career success, okay? In the workplace, in an organization, anywhere really, we can parse the things that motivate us. I'll call them rewards. We can parse them as intrinsic and extrinsic. That's a way the research and literature parses them. You've probably heard those terms. Intrinsic means the reward is the pleasure of doing the job. If my job was eating ice cream all day, it would be intrinsically motivating. Extrinsic is the reward you get after you do a good job. So doing the job is instrumental to getting the thing you really want. And you can even parse it a little further. These extrinsic rewards can be tangible or intangible. What is, and at this point, it might be helpful if you had a microphone, or for now, just you can say the answer and I'll repeat it. Tell me what is the primary, tangible, extrinsic reward that you see in the workplace?
Money.
Oh, I guess I didn't even need to repeat money. I heard that loud and clear. So, yes, okay, harder question. Tell me an intangible extrinsic reward that you might receive in the workplace.
Knowledge.
Ooh, knowledge, like it, nice. Yes, was there another? Pardon? Networking, nice, absolutely. Thinking very co-op minded, fantastic. Status, appreciation, yeah, we could go on and on with the intangibles, right? Well, take a moment then, now that you're keyed into the rewards of the workplace. Take just a minute or two in your table, talk to each other about the reward that you found extremely motivating that either attracted you to your co-op position or once you were there, made you very motivated. And then I'll get a few answers from you, okay? Proceed, talk to one another, and come up with one you want to share. Okay. You've probably had enough time by now to come up with at least one good one for your table. Can I get a helper volunteer, someone who would be willing to collect from the audience about, let's say, 4 or 5 different rewards that individuals found very motivating? Thank you so much. I took that as a willingness to volunteer. All you have to do is look sideways and you're in. So raise your hand. Anyone who would like to share? Okay, then.
Okay. My personal extrinsic value that I found was the satisfaction of having a guy who had a whole career in that field go to you and say, hey, that's a nice job you did, congratulations. That was probably the biggest thing I liked.
Oh, nice. I'd put that in the intangible rewards category, extrinsic intangible. Yeah, I like it. Okay, thank you for doing that. Now,
Red. And the kid in red.
nice, nice. Nicely done.
Our reward was
Be more specific. Was there a specific incentive, hiring bonus, pay level? Ooh, high pay. High pay. Remember that. Like it. Good for you. Find another volunteer. By volunteer, I mean give the mic to the person that you think you would like to hear speak.
My extrinsic reward was probably learning to not have fear of an industry that was foreign to me before. And I work besides my co-workers, which are full-time employees, and it was pretty fun.
Very
And I learned a lot.
All right, I almost put you in the intrinsic reward category. Nice. All right. Let's get one more input. Your choice of person. Unless someone has a burning desire to share.
I think my business intrinsic integral was that there's no cap on overtime, and they didn't care how much I used to take late.
Ooh, we're back to the money, and you could make as much as you like. Very well paid. Did you get paid time and a half for overtime? I'm curious. Ooh. Yeah, I like that. Oh. Racking up the dollar signs. Okay. Nice. Nice from all of you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask something now, and you can turn the mic off for the moment just by pushing that button to the left and holding it down. Good. Thank you. I want to ask a question that may seem odd. Now that you shared that information about your recent co-op positions, does the reward that you receive, the rest of you that you didn't get to share, but does it seem any less or more attractive now compared to before, learning what your peers received? And I want to maybe show you something by way of example that might drive this point home a little more. So let's say, what is your name? Tim, let's just assume you had a day free next week, okay? And with that free day, I'm asking, giving you this job opportunity to work one day as my research assistant, and the pay is $1,000. Does that sound motivating? How motivated are you, say, on a scale of 1 to 10?
Like 7.
Okay, 2,000. How many?
A 9.
A 9? Oh. You're tough. Okay, just keep it at 2,000 and I get 9 level motivation. All right. What is your name?
Alicia.
Alicia. I know you have the same ability as Tim, and I need the same job done, and I would like to ask if you'd be willing to do that, and I can pay you $8,000 for the day. Are you pretty motivated? Okay, and Tim, you're a 9 on motivation, right? And you're still a 9. Are you okay that Alicia got 8,000? Did I say 8? I forget now. I'm so generous with this money. Let's say 8. That didn't change your level of motivation?
Well, if you were given a job offer, they would tell you how much they're paying the other people, so
Oh, and you know why they don't?
your motivation doesn't go down.
Yeah, but you're right on, Tim, exactly. Because what's just occurred to you is exactly what the research shows and what we probably know intuitively, but we don't always recognize about ourselves because it can have this insidious effect, and that is we don't just look at our reward in a vacuum. We evaluate it in comparison to others, so in a relative way. when we do that, what seemed like a good reward can all of a sudden seem like an inferior reward. So when I ask that question, do any of you feel less motivated by what you received in your co-op now that you heard about all this maybe money or all this intrinsic reward or all this praise that might have been received? Did that make you look at yours differently? And that's a rhetorical question, but just know from the research that yes, it would tend to. And what happens when that ratio is out of balance, you experience cognitive dissonance, this need to bring it back into balance. That's how we're hardwired. And look at this. If it's out of balance in the overpayment direction, you tend to be okay with that somehow. Intuitively, we can understand that, right? You tend to find a way to rationalize that if you're the one that's over-rewarded, if the ratio comparison is in your favor. But if it's not in your favor, that's when it becomes psychologically painful and you look to resolve that disconnect. You look to restore equity. And it's not on a rational basis, it's this irrational, in terms of economic utility, this irrational response that occurs. And I want to explain to you what I mean about that, because that's really important, because that can derail you on your path to your goal. And it can do it in a way that you don't realize has happened. So there's an experiment that's conducted in research over the years. It's classic. It's called the ultimatum game. So if you were economically rational, if I were to offer you $30 with no strings attached here, most people, the economically rational response would be, okay, I'll take it. I mean, there's hardly ever a time getting $30 for nothing is a bad thing. There's hardly ever a time that getting 0 would be preferred to getting 30, is there? If no strings are attached. Well, in this game, though, there's a rule. There's 2 people, and you're given one of the one person in that pair is given the money to allocate. So let's say it's $100. And we'll stick with Tim for a moment. Tim, you have the 100, and keep in mind, we are sometimes self-interested, looking to maximize our own economic utility. So you're told to allocate it between you and Alicia. And the only stipulation is you both you only get one shot at it, and if Alicia does not accept it, you both get nothing. As long as she accepts, you both get to keep whatever amount you kept for yourself and whatever amount you allocated to Alicia. So if you split it 50-50, she's pretty likely to say yes, and you both get $50. But if you're maximizing your own utility, you might think, can I give her less? I get more, and she'd still say yes. So if Tim kept 60 and gave you 40, would you probably say yes? Maybe. Maybe, and the research shows most people would still say yes, not everyone. But the real tipping point is when Tim tries to keep 70 and give Alicia 30, remember, $30, that's found money, but wait a minute, all of a sudden, it's just not fair, right? I mean, this is what I find in my research. When I do qualitative research, most of my research is empirical, analyzing data, but the interesting part comes in when I do qualitative research and do interviews, and I hear this, well, it wasn't fair. It becomes this emotional response, not a rational response, and because it's not fair, you're going to punish Tim, and you both get nothing because you're going to refuse to accept. This is what the research would show. Do you think you would feel that way, Alicia?
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine until you're right in the spot, but research shows most people would draw the line at that 70-30 inequity. Well, what does that mean? When I take it to the organization, and I interviewed a ton of people throughout different organizations in different work contexts, and I asked them to reflect on a time when they had a team reward or an inequity of some sort, and they had no problem recalling it. They recalled it with passion, and the surprising part, although it's consistent with the research, but it never ceases to still surprise me, is there could be very small amounts that we were talking about, but the attitude, the psychological pain to that amount, and it could have happened years ago. It was just out of proportion, the scale. They would tell me, and that's why I left the organization, or that's why I'm leaving here. One student just wrote, I asked for a paragraph. He wrote a couple pages because he needed to vent how unhappy he was over this slight inequity because it's an emotional thing. I want to show you a clip, and in this clip, you're going to see that when I said we're hardwired, it's really a primal response. This was an experiment. It's a study published in Nature, a scientific journal, an experiment with capuchin monkeys. These monkeys were trained to return a token to the experimenter in exchange for reward, for a cucumber slice. But within sight of each other, sometimes the other monkey got a grape. A grape is better than a cucumber, apparently, and that monkey got a reward, an over-reward. There was inequity. Inequity is what I'm saying, right? Equity, inequity. And you won't see it in this clip, but in the study, sometimes they mixed it up a little more. Even without returning a token, this other monkey, this over-rewarded monkey could get a grape for doing nothing. Oh, the unfairness of it all. So let's see how they respond, and then think of you in the workplace.
So the final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this is a very famous study of many workers after we did this about 10 years ago. It became very well done. And we did that originally with capuchin monkey. And I'm going to show you the first experiment. It has done with dogs, birds, chimpanzees. This is a desire, often desire. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in the world. They know each other. We take them out of the room and put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine. Now, if you give the barley grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so, if you give them grapes as a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped this new monkeys who've never done the task, thinking that maybe they have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber knows that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece he eats. Then she sees the other one like a grape and we'll see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now. Gets again cucumber.
I want to thank Monica Galitsky from our econ department for finding that clip. I had read the study and used it in class for several years and didn't know this great clip existed, and Monica shared it. But it's funny to watch, but in a way, I feel very sorry for the monkeys. And I've felt like that monkey, and I feel sorry for us when we feel that way. More importantly, how can you manage those feelings so you can remain productive in your career working towards your goal? Here's what research says tends to happen. We want to find ways to restore equity. So we do that by decreasing your own inputs. That's a word from the theory to say increasing or decreasing your work performance. What you give in exchange for what you get. Just remember back to that ratio. Just like with any ratio, you can change the ratio by changing one of those pieces of the equation. So reduce your inputs. Or you could just complain about it. Sabotage and theft, it's a way to increase your reward, increase your outcome. Again, you're bringing your ratio in balance yourself. Quit. This is what I found time and again in my research. People just quit. And whatever you do out of those options or any other option, you're using up cognitive resources. It's draining you of energy and resources that could be better spent towards the goal at hand, the real goal, your goal that you have for your career. So what would you do instead? Give me a couple responses and I'll show you my list. What would you do instead that would be more productive? And by the way, this I said is subtle, it's insidious. You really have to be first know it exists, now you do know, and then be conscious of managing it because it sneaks up on you. But what would you do now that you know? How would you handle this more productively? Say that again. Oh, that is a good one.
Speak to your management.
Absolutely. So first, you could go and bring it up in a rational way and see if that ratio can be changed based on your request. That would be one productive way to handle it, absolutely. And other ways to handle it, get at this point that these are perceptions. This isn't a one objective measure that is external of you. It's your perception. It's subjective. It's what you perceive. And your perception could be wrong. Your perception could be changed. So having said that, is there another way you could think of addressing it? I'll show you my ways, and you tell me if this sounds reasonable. Number one answer, speak directly to your manager. If you perceive that inequity, bring it up, see if it can be addressed. But also, think about your perception. Are you using the right point of comparison? We call it in that particular theory, referent other. Who are your reference? Look at other reference. Okay, Alicia got 8,000, but what is your name? Matt, so you might take a look and see what Matt got, right, Tim? I mean, your referent does not have to be only Alicia. Expand your definition of what the rewards are. And when you talk about the rewards you receive from your workplace, you hit it right on the head. Okay, money's one. That's an easy metric to look at and perceive an inequity occurring under. But let's not forget the appreciation or the recognition, let's not forget the intrinsic rewards. You might expand your definition of the rewards you're receiving. You might objectively reevaluate your inputs. Maybe your inputs, what you're giving in performance, is not equal to the other person. But overall, you might just stop focusing on that. We made it very salient when we asked you to talk about your rewards, when I put it right out there in front of you and rubbed your face in it. But you could shift your focus from that to the bigger goal at hand. When you find yourself being consumed, when you find your cognitive resources being wasted with this psychological pain of inequity. Does that sound reasonable? Does it sound like something you could do if you're consciously thinking of it? Good. I hope so. It's a great tool. Notice right now we've focused up to this point on ways to maximize your motivation. I said if your motivation's being drained by inequity, remove that drain. We backed up before that and said how to develop grit to increase that psychological force we called motivation. So more motivation is always good. More is better, right?
Not all the time.
Correct. When would it not be good? What could possibly be the downside to more motivation? Yeah.
What if your job was to create like weapons?
If your job is to do evil, doing more of it could be bad. I agree. But even if your job is to do good, more motivation. So this is from a study I did. I don't expect you to be able to or take the time to read the small print here. I want you to look at the shape of the curve is what I want to draw your attention to. What this is showing is hours worked compared to the sustainability of human capital. And it shows, okay, more hours worked, the human capital increases. You see this nice more is better kind of relationship going on until you get to a point of diminishing returns. And then each incremental additional hour worked doesn't give you as much return, but it gives you some. But then you get to this inflection point where you're actually being counterproductive. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm right in your way, right? You're actually being counterproductive with each additional hour put into the job. So if we say work hours could be equated to motivation in this case, the same thing applies with motivation, that an excess amount of motivation can be counterproductive. And think of it, it's called the human performance regeneration paradox. Because to perform at intense levels needed for high achievement, yet performing at a tense level erodes your ability for high achievement gradually and again insidiously. So you have to really have your guard up because most people don't recognize this depletion in themselves. But it does it two ways. One, the obvious way, you get burnout, you become physically depleted, just like a machine that hasn't had time to turn off and rest and recharge. But also, you are so focused on this specific job at hand, you aren't developing your new knowledge in other areas that are not so narrowly focused. And that kind of creative exploitation that adds to your human capital is needed to keep your human capital current and marketable. So for those reasons, more is not reach a point where you need to recognize to manage this motivation, but manage motivation that gets too high. Interesting thing, I don't know if you've followed this, you might since you're watching organizations pretty closely now, looking for co-op opportunities, looking for future jobs. But these organizations in particular very recently added a policy to assure regular time off. Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Bank of America. They didn't do that just to be nice. They did it for the reason I just pointed out, to increase the ability for employees to be productive and remain productive. Japan legislated recently, again, very recently, an additional public holiday. They had to initiate an additional public holiday to ensure their employees would take more time off. They have a word for this culture of overwork, karoshi. What does that translate to? Does anyone know? Raise your hand if you know. Anyone? It translates to death by overwork. That's pretty serious that they would need a word for that, right? That's some serious hyper-motivation. My label for it. And on the other side of the coin, I'll tell you about a study that was done with the project teams from Boston Consulting Group. Took place over the course of a year. They experimented with these teams. Some of the teams were control groups who worked their long hours like they always did. Other teams, the members took turns taking regular, pre-planned, required time off. And for them, these are all high achievers, so it's this high-achieving group again. So for them, that meant leaving on time 1 day a week, and once they left, they could not get on their email, their phone, anything else to do with work. And it may not surprise you, or that, although it seems a little odd, that they fought this. They said, oh, no, we can't do that. We're working on this important project. I want to be the high achiever that gets the promotion. This will make me look bad. They didn't want to take this time off. That's what high achievers do. You all, I put in that category. You're doing the co-op experience, you're going to school. I would say you're a high-achieving group, and you don't want to take that time off. They were forced to, though, on a regular basis. So what they found as they measured outcomes from them enforcing this regular time off is employees, after a while, after they adjusted to it, were more satisfied compared to this control group, the teams that did not take that regular time off. And the product quality, this was a self-report measure, but still, it was done rigorously. The product quality, that what they delivered to the client was rated more highly for the group where they rotated taking that regular 1 night a week off. And after looking at my curvilinear relationship, you can piece it all together and see why. So you need to manage your motivation at this range that is productive. If you think back to the pyramid, I've just covered 3 of the things. I have 1 more to cover. It's my favorite one. Remember what it was on the pyramid? It was right at the top. Oh, you do remember. I feel rewarded by that. Thank you. Right, we've talked about the quantity of motivation. You probably have never thought too much in terms of quality of motivation. You maybe did a moment ago when we parsed it intrinsic and extrinsic. But let me ask you, you think it's one or the other? I often have people say, I hear people say when they find out motivation is my area of study, my specialty, my passion, and extrinsic motivation in particular, which money is the big extrinsic motivator. They say, oh, well, I'm not about money. No, I work for the passion of the job, the love of the job, and because it has to be one or the other, right? He said no, and he was right. It does not have to be. Sometimes it is that way because extrinsic motivation can crowd out intrinsic motivation. Research shows that. That's a thing in the research. If the extrinsic motivator becomes controlling, it crowds out your intrinsic motivation. But that's only one view of it. Intrinsic and extrinsic can exist in harmony. And when it does, again, don't try to read all the words. This is research done by a person I had the pleasure of meeting and working with at a conference, Hugo Kerr. I wanted to show you his exact model from his published paper. But the thing I want you to focus on is the spot in the center. That spot in the center is where some task at hand happens to be, for you, intrinsically motivating, extrinsically motivating, and this bottom circle is you perceive you have the ability to do it. All 3 overlap on occasion, and when they do, that equals flow. Flow, this state, it's kind of hard to define, but you know it when you're not in it. How do you know it when you're not in it? Does time go fast or slow? Real slow, like, oh, did somebody move that hand backwards, right? When you're in the complete opposite of flow. When you're in flow, it's timeless, effortless. Well, I want to tell you just a little about me and flow, because this is what I seek in my motivation. So I worked as a consultant for a number of years. Ray went over my bio, and you heard that part of it. And I, at one point, was doing an evaluation of a business, and I partnered with a former accounting professor of mine, because my undergraduate degree was in accounting, and I sought him out, and he did consulting on the side, and I said, let's work on this together, because he did litigation work. He was really good in his field, and it was great partnership. But during that partnership, I thought that he has the life. Okay, so he has the extrinsic motivating piece, fair pay. Seems like a lot of free time. That's an extrinsic motivator too, by the way. Even though you think of it as intrinsically rewarding, if someone is giving that to you, it can be categorized as extrinsic motivator. But also got to work on these stimulating projects. So I had some of that, but as a consultant, I didn't have any free time, and I didn't always get to work on what I wanted to because the fee dictated it. There was a lot of external control by the client. So I thought, no, okay, I'm switching fields, and I did. Here's what I found. Fair pay, stimulating work, no free time, but that's okay because I love what I do. I feel many times that my work is effortless and time is irrelevant. That I feel flow. And how would you get there? I thought about that, and this is what I came up with, and this is what I'll leave you with. We'll go into the Q&A. In your co-op experiences, you're building the foundation to experience flow on a regular basis. You've experienced it at some point up till now, I know, I'm not saying you never have, but how do you get it from work on a regular basis? Well, one is, remember, flow is where extrinsic, intrinsic motivation, and ability overlap. That sweet spot there where the three overlap. So building your ability is one piece of it, and co-op experience does that. So you're smart, you're on track. Co-op experience gives you leverage for those future extrinsic rewards. It gives them to you now, apparently a lot with the overtime too, very nice. But it gives you leverage to keep getting that and get more of that. Because I like to work for the passion and the intrinsic rewards, but I also love money, and I love to tell people I love money in case they think I don't want to give it to me, or so they know I do, so they give me more. And this gives you the leverage to do that. And it also, because intrinsic motivation, the reason we don't focus on intrinsic motivation in the workplace as managers, on how to manage that, is because it's a squirrely thing. It's so individualized. What is intrinsically motivating to one won't be to the other. And it's hard for even you to know what motivates you intrinsically, I dare say, because I know I feel that way. But the more you're exposed to, the more you figure out what you find intrinsically motivating, and then a better chance you have of all three of those coming together. That's my story. There's full citations at the end, references, so you can look at these resources in more detail if you choose. And I will now answer any questions and then turn you free for, I think, food, right? So. Thank you, you great audience. Is there any comment or question, or are you going to let it soak in for now? So? Okay. Thanks, everyone. I will pass the microphone back to Ray Perry. And I didn't get to say at the beginning, but that great title that might have engaged you, looking at the material in advance, that was Ray's title, Put to My Work, and very creative. Nicely done.
Thank you very much. If everybody can join me in thanking Kim for joining us.